I absolutely love discovering new ways to use concrete materials to help kids think through different mathematical concepts. Did you know that you could use two color counters to represent fractions and use them with different fraction operations? In this example up top, where we have a set of three, the way we represent this would be that's a total of three in our set. And these two color counters have a red and a yellow side. So if I wanted to represent 1/3, I would just flip one of those over. Or 2/3, I could flip over two of them. Okay, same thing here, same concept here. And I would represent this. The numerator would be 1 because it's only one yellow one flipped over. And this one would be 4. And the same can be said about using two color counters to compare fractions that have that are unlike. And we're going to do that with two other numbers. So I want to compare these unlike fractions, but we're going to compare them to these particular benchmarks because we know that using benchmarks when kids are learning how to compare fractions will help them with estimating and reasoning without having to get an exact answer. Benchmarks are good for anchoring their understanding. And also, when they begin to learn abstract strategies for comparing fractions, then they'll be able to go back and reference these benchmarks to determine if their answer is reasonable or if they're on the right track. So, to see if their answer makes sense. And that's a really important thing for kids to be able to do, to justify their thinking. So we're going to compare the two fractions, 3/8 and 3/5. We are going to compare them to these benchmarks, but we're going to use the two color counters. So I'm going to simply count out all my counters. But since the numerator is 3 in this one, I'm going to flip this one over to show 3 yellow, and then the rest will be red. So there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the difference is, we want to make sure these are together. We want to consider the benchmarks, all right? And so in the second fraction is 3/5. I'm going to flip over 3 to be yellow. Again, they are touching. And then the last two will be red because it's a fraction set of 5. And then to compare them, because this is 3/8 and this is 3/5, we want to compare them to the fraction, the benchmarks of 1/2 and then 1/2. Now, prior to learning the strategy or with kids building understanding about different fraction concepts, they should at this point have an understanding of what a half of a set means or what 1/2 means. That's an important thing to be able to determine that. It's easier with even numbers. And so with the fraction set of 8 or this size, then we know that half of 8 would be a total of 4. So this will be our halfway point, 4/8, which is equivalent to 1/2, all right? And so we can see here that with only 3 of these being yellow, that hasn't quite reached the halfway mark for half of this set. So 3/8 is less than a half. But if I were to compare 3/5 to 1/2, now this is an odd number, but it's still important for kids to be able to determine half of odd and even numbers. So in this case, what they can do is consider, well, this, if it were 4, it would be two whole counters. However, the 5th one requires us to think about half of that. Okay, so the halfway mark of 5 would be 2 1/2. Okay, so this is our halfway mark right here. All right, and so because we have a total of 3, 3 out of the 5 is actually a little bit more than our halfway mark. So it kind of goes a little bit beyond that. So we can kind of see where this is going, that 3 out of the 5 or 3/5 is greater than 3/8 because 3/5 is greater than a half, but 3/8 is less than a half. But what we also want to consider is the 1/2 benchmark. And in this case, if you're using the counters, you would consider how many in your numerator, how many out of the set. We have 3 out of 8, or 3/8 of this, and then we have 3/5 of this one. And you want to see basically which one is closer to 1/2. So this makes 8/8, and that's our whole set, and this is 5/5 for our whole set. So which one of these is closer to 1/2 being filled in? Well, here we have 3 of them being yellow, and then 3 of them being yellow here in this set. And this is one of those pitfalls when kids just think about just only one of these numbers. This is why having a visual concrete materials is also good. And so in this case, because it would take 5 more in the set to reach 1/2 compared to only 2 more in this set, then this 3/5 is closer to 1/2 or closer to 5/5. So again, another reason why 3/5 is greater than 3/8. And so we will put the less than sign here because of how it's written. 3/8 is less than 3/5 because 1, it's less than a half, and 3/5 is greater than a half. Or you can also say 3/5 is closer to 1/2 compared to 3/8.